So, you've been listening to us for a little while. So we've dragged you through a lot of things, haven't we? You create your own reality. You said, oh, yay. And then you said, oh, no. And then you went through that phase where you beat up on yourself because the reality you were creating sucked. And then we began talking to you about, with a stronger emphasis, that you are vibrational beings, which is hard for you to accept at first. It's easy to accept when you're thinking about clarity, but it's harder for you to accept when you're thinking about relationship, isn't it? In other words, clarity is something that you could achieve right now. In fact, don't you feel pretty clear right now just listening to us? We're just really excellent teachers. You do. You are feeling reasonable clarity as a result of this conversation. But if you were to focus upon something that you want that hasn't manifested yet, it would induce within you a different feeling in most cases. Because when you want something that you're not yet living, you're in the not yet living it awareness introducing resistance into the equation. So we talk to you in vibrational terms because we want you to accept that you are vibrational and that the vibration that you offer is about the thought you think. It's about the focus. So when we use words like vibration or energy, we're talking about the same thing. When we use words like thought or energy, we're talking about the same thing. Or vibration, we're talking about the same thing. So how do you know? How do you measure what you're doing vibrationally? Because you don't exactly have someone brought to one of the gatherings an electronic contraption that he thought everyone should buy and hook themselves up to. And we said, it's cumbersome. You don't need some outside meter telling you what you're doing vibrationally. The meter doesn't even work. You've got this vibrational guidance system within you that is your emotions. So when you feel something like ease or clarity, that means that there is little or no resistance within you right now. You are not contradicting your own thought. So when you say, I want this, wouldn't it be nice to have such and such? And you just visualize being it or doing it or having it or living it. Wouldn't that be nice? And the idea of it just feels so good to you. And then you say, but, hardly anybody is doing that. You have just introduced unnecessary resistance to the equation. Why would you do that? Because you've been trained to be realist. You've been trained to be objective. You've been trained to weigh the pros and the cons and the pluses and the minuses. And we say, you've done enough of that. You've sifted through enough and put enough in your vibrational reality to keep yourselves busy for 20 or 30 lifetimes. This is the phase of your life where what you're wanting to do is purify or clarify your vibrational flow. And you do that by caring about how you feel when you think the thought. But we know that unless you have played the game, as Esther did, for a month, she's 6 or 7 weeks into it now, you really don't have any personal awareness. It's hard for you to tell those vibrational subtleties until you get yourself really in a place where you have felt for a period of time a chronic feeling of lack of resistance, because you don't know you've got resistance until you've experienced enough time without it. Does that make sense to you? And so in the beginning, when people would come to us and they would say, what's the best thing that you can teach us? We would say meditation. Because it's easier for us to teach you to have no thought than it is to teach you to have pure positive thought. Because you've got enough momentum going on enough thoughts that are resistant in nature. In other words, don't you sort of automatically introduce resistance? Isn't there a but to almost everything? And do you know the reason that you do that is because you're trying to explain to others where you are. We wish you would cut that out. You're trying to explain to others why you're where you are. I'm standing here. I really want that. But well, you're not ever going to do that again without remembering us playing with you here today and reminding you that you, in those kinds of verbal or mental offerings, are introducing unnecessary resistance into your vibrational patterning, which is just bogging you down. So, recently we found some analogies that are really helpful to you. We're wanting you to realize that as you stand in any moment in time and think a thought, that you are offering a vibration that with as little as 17 seconds is going to gather momentum. Because at that 17-second mark, another thought, vibrationally equivalent, is going to join it, which is going to speed the process. And then, if you maintain that, another thought like that is going to join it, which is going to speed the process again. And then, if you maintain that for another 17 seconds, this is not much time, is it? Once you cross that 68-second mark, there is significant enough momentum going that your experience is now going to be affected. Esther bumped into a handful of people in the hotel last night. Here and there and here and there and here and there and here and there. And every one of them said, I told myself, wouldn't it be fun if I got to run into Esther? And we say, don't think that those things are accidental. They are orchestrated by your non-resisted thought. And in every case, it was a wouldn't it be nice feeling. It wasn't, I've got a desperate problem that I need to talk to you about, and maybe if I could get you aside, you could give me some insight. Esther met no one like that, and you were in the hotel. It was that high-flying, wouldn't it be fun if, you see. When you make a promise to yourself that you want to fly high, and we're going to talk to you what we mean by that flying high soon. When you make the decision that you want to fly high, which means you want to be as often as you can with as little or no resistance as you can find through the clarity of your thought, when that becomes your dominant intention, everything in your world begins to shift because your point of attraction shifts. And that means every relationship that now exists will change. It means the rendezvous timing in the relationships that exist must change. It means the new strangers that you run into will change. Esther had a funny experience because she's moving around California a little bit in the area where she is living part-time. And she came out of Starbucks a month or so ago, and someone said, Esther, and came up to her, delighted to see her. I am aware of you. I've been watching you on YouTube, and I can't believe that I've just run into you. And Esther couldn't believe it either. And she had her iced tea in her hand, and she was carrying her dry cleaning, and she was on her way to the car, and happy to see this bright, happy person. And so they exchanged an email or two, and then Esther did not think about him, except that she was aware every time she went back to the dry cleaners or every time she went back to Starbucks, she thought about that very pleasant meeting. So she thought about him 10 or 15 times since seeing him. So now, weeks have gone by, and now she is in another part of the city, 20 miles from there, and stopped at her new favorite place, In-N-Out Burger. Went inside and washed her hands and ordered her cheeseburger and got a big cup for a drink, and then is on the phone with her daughter Tracy, which is something really fun to do when eating lunch. And she said, hold on, I'm getting a drink. And Esther said iced tea, because she's decided not to drink the diet stuff anymore. Tracy's convinced her it's poison. Whatever. It is as you believe it to be. The worst thing you can do is believe something that isn't good for you and drink a lot of it. That is not a good equation. So she's on the phone with her daughter, and she's saying, I'm getting a drink, iced tea, I'm getting iced tea. And Tracy is saying, and how do I know that you're really getting iced tea? So Esther said to the total stranger standing next to her, tell her it's iced tea. So this very nice man speaks into the telephone. It's iced tea. And Tracy says, and how much did you pay him? And Esther said, tell her how much I paid you. $20. So Esther has now sort of embarrassed herself because she is really having way too much fun with strangers. As she looked around, and there were a fair number of people looking in her direction, and now she has her bag of burger and her very large drink and her purse and her keys and her phone. And she's making her way to her car, thinking, I'm not really presenting myself very well in this moment. And then getting in the car was very tricky, but she managed to get in without spilling anything on anyone. And when she got home, there was an email from her Starbucks friend who said, did you really get iced tea? He'd been standing there somewhere in the vicinity, witnessing the whole thing. And Esther is thinking, this is a law of attraction story. In other words, he's been active in my vibration. Of course the universe would bring him to me again. Now, this all seems inconsequential and maybe unimportant, but we want you to know these are the things that make up the hours and the minutes and the days and the weeks and the years of your life. In other words, what you are doing, how you are feeling, there isn't anything that Esther wants more than fun. And apparently she's developing a new fun friendship because she keeps having fun in odd ways and this person keeps showing up. But what we are saying to you is there is nothing that ever happens. There is no rendezvous that ever happens. There is never anyone in your vicinity that is not in some way a player in the vibrational offering that you have been offering. So when something as inconsequential as that, Esther is realizing she's just had a few fleeting thoughts about this person, and he's showing up in her experience in a very not freakish, not lucky, in a very orchestrated by law of attraction way. Can you imagine what's happening with the thoughts that you're doing on purpose? Can you imagine what a focus wheel would do for you? Can you imagine the effectiveness of the universe who could line up things for you that you want if you weren't shooting them in the foot or introducing resistance to them with your own contradictory thought? But, you see what we're getting at? Esther didn't introduce any resistance into this idea of this young man. He was just fresh and bright and beautiful and something to think about, and there was no contradictory thought in her vibration. So he represents all things that you think about without resistance, who will come into your experience with the same magnitude of the thought that you've been offering. In other words, it's a casual meeting, and so that's the equivalent. In other words, it doesn't mean there's something big and meaningful. It doesn't mean that she should seek him out. It means it's a demonstration to Esther that that light thinking with that lack of resistance produces that. Would you like to do some less light thinking? Would you like to do some more concentrated thinking? Would you like to think more deliberately about more things? And would you like to do it with the same light ease, the same absence of resistance? Because when you do, the universe will bring that person right to you again. And the 20-mile radius, it's not a 20-mile radius. There is no limitation on the mileage radius at all. You have no idea how far we've come to be with you here today. There is no distance. There are no limitations apart from those that you apply through thoughts that contradict desire. You get that? We are eager to talk to you about anything that is important to you. There is nothing off limits. We're going to have a really fun day. Don't worry about us. We will wedge our message in the crack. What do you want to talk about? Something.